Okay, everybody, we're going to start. The editors, we're expecting, are stuck in traffic, that they'll be here momentarily, but that's fine because I wanted to welcome you all to the Applebaum Publishers and Editors Series. This is the first of 4 events that we're going to be doing this semester for the series at Kelly Writers House. And what we've done, we're tying it in with a class that I'm teaching, which is a special literary magazine focus section of English 115 Advanced Fiction Writing. In this class, instead of reading whatever stories I would have selected for the students or whatever stories the students would have brought in on their own from literary magazines, which is what I often have them do in my advanced class, we're using specifically the text from 4 different literary magazines, Apiary being the first one. Each of the magazines I chose are very different. We're using Apiary, which is a brand new magazine, just 2 years old, and it's an independent magazine. It was started by 4 young editors, 3 of them 2007 graduates of Swarthmore College, and 1 of them a graduate from the MFA program at Arcadia. They have a very interesting and unusual focus, which is that they bring in writers of all ages from out the community, writers of all different levels. They bring in writers that are very established and writers that are completely emerging, including writers that are 7 years old and writers that are 80 years old. So it's a really inclusive and interesting magazine. And they are also very, very involved in tying the literary community together. They do a lot of events and they do a lot of partnering with other magazines and other literary community projects, including spoken word poetry, that sort of thing. So they're just really kind of bringing the whole concept of literary writing to a whole different level in the city, and they've done a lot of great work. We're also bringing in, as a contrasting types of magazine, we're bringing in the Painted Bride Quarterly, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a magazine that I think began in 1974 and was an independent magazine associated with the Painted Bride for many, many years. Now they are part of Drexel University. So we have a university-sponsored magazine that has a paid staff and interns and co-opers who are working on it. So they have a very different sort of product. Painted Bride used to come out several times a year in small magazines that will look like your typical literary magazine. Now they put out their issues online, and then they have a great big fat print annual that they come out with. So it's a different literary experience. We're also bringing in a little bit late that Painted Bride's going to be here in, I think it is. Oh, I don't have my schedule with me, but you'll look at Writers House. They'll be sending it. October 24th. Thank you. Yes, they'll be coming on October 24th. We'll be having another luncheon like this with editors from the Painted Bride coming in to talk to you. And then on November 7th, we're bringing in editors from One Story Magazine, which is a magazine based in New York. It's a really interesting little magazine. They print one story every 3 weeks, and they mail out. It's not distributed on the internet. They mail out to the subscribers one story. You get this lovely little sort of pamphlet in the mail. It's very beautifully produced, nicely typeset, but there's no illustration. It's really just one story. And they've done very, very well. They are an independent magazine, self-funded. And then our last visitor will be on, I believe, November 28th, and that is Electric Literature, also New York-based, completely different. It is only available in PDF form. When you subscribe to it, you can get your copy instantly, or you can choose to get a future copy going forward. Beautiful magazine with incredibly stunning graphics, really nicely produced. But and they do a print annual, but their basic premise is that they're electric. So what you receive is electric. Okay. So all these writers are going to come in and visit our class, and we're also going to have all these editors, and talk to my students, give them real face time, and explain to them, and be able to have a dialogue with them about how an editor, and here we go, sees a publication. And I see our editor from Apiary has arrived with her presentation, so she'll be here shortly. Meanwhile, in our class, the students, some of them will get to workshop their stories with these editors, and they'll really get to see what it is from the other side of the desk. What is the editor looking for? So that's useful for them as a writer, but it's also useful for a lot of our students are interested in going into literary arts and becoming, perhaps an editor themselves. So it'll be a really interesting sort of smorgasbord for them to see how these very, very different publications are reacting to the kind of literary writing that we do here at Penn. Okay. And I'd like to introduce Lillian Dunn, one of the editors of Apiary Magazine, who's here with her presentation.
Where do I sit?
You get to choose.
Oh, so many.
Yeah.
Less microphones.
One is for you, one's for Tamara, who's also on her way.
I got this little guy.
Oh, you brought.
And it should be the first thing that comes up. Second or something? This thing. Okay.
So I'd like to introduce Lillian Dunn. I've already introduced the magazine. And
Oh,
you might-
fabulous.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for being here. This is very, very exciting. I started out my career as a reader and enjoyer of Philadelphia literature here at the Kelly Writers House. I took a workshop here with Laureen Carey in 2007. And the Kelly Writers House and Laureen and the Philly writing scene were really transformative in that moment. It was my senior year of college, and the workshop was called Writing in Concert. And I'm not sure if Laureen is offering it this spring or not, but I'm sorry, I just ran up the bridge in my fancy Kelly Writers House heels. Okay. Anyway, so the workshop asked you to read a text, think about it, process it, and then go teach it. And then in any sort of community setting. And these ranged from Project Home, where you were teaching it to homeless men and women who sometimes were mentally ill, so any workshop was totally unpredictable, to the High School of the Future, where you couldn't use paper because everything was on a whiteboard. And so you had to think about a piece of literature very deeply and adapt it to the people you were speaking to. And that's, I think, that experience of teaching, we were reading Octavia Butler that year, and then coming to have a workshop here in this writer's house was this moment in which I realized that writing was not just about being a better writer than somebody else or being really wowed by the beauty of the language on your own. It was about a sense of community that forms around writing. And different artists have different art forms. Everyone has their own art form. It might be baseball, it might be soccer, it might be video games. My preferred art form is words and literature. And so what happens when I sit down in a group of other people who love writing is that we share a medium in which we can communicate, and when we're making art, we're telling the other readers and writers something about ourselves. And because it's a shared art form, they can understand what we're saying and what we're trying to say, because sometimes, as you guys probably all know, it doesn't come out quite right the first or the third or the 53rd time. And so when I moved to Philly in 2009, I finally started a little writers group with some friends, one of whom is Michelle Crouch, who was in Karen's workshop, and one of whom is Tamara Oakman, who's coming to talk with us today. And we started workshopping. We'd kind of casually, it was just friends. And I don't know if you've ever tried to start a workshop with friends, but sometimes you don't actually do that much workshopping. So we ended up just kind of hanging out and talking about writing. And we thought, okay, we need a project to keep us on track because, we know each other too well to keep us disciplined with the writing. And we were kind of having a conversation about the literary offerings in the city. And I was working with children at the time. I was working at Mighty Writers, and I was teaching a creative writing workshop at a charter school. Tamara was leading a writing through therapy group, and her workshop dealt with creating a safe space for survivors of trauma to come together and use writing to heal. And Michelle was working in fiction in several different workshops around the city. My friend Nick was offering workshops at, I think, the Attic Youth Center and Spiral Q. So we were all working with this huge variety of people and going to go see a bunch of different workshops around the city. I was really starting to enjoy spoken word, which is a vast portion of what the city has to offer in terms of literature. And we realized that we didn't see a magazine in which we could enjoy some of the most exciting, fun writing that we had experienced out in the city, out and about. And so we thought, okay, well, what if we had a magazine where you could read a 13-year-old's really beautiful poem next to the writing of someone who had come to writing as a way of healing, next to someone who's been published in, the New Yorker from Philadelphia. What if all of those things could coexist? What would happen? What kind of space would arise from that? And we just got really excited about that idea. So from there, we decided to start a magazine. And I don't know how the name Apiary got chosen, but I think Michelle and I both kind of had it the same. We wanted something at the beginning of the alphabet. And we both really liked this word. It was really weird. I mean, if I had to start over and choose a name again, I might not choose this one, although now I really love it because nobody can pronounce it, which has led to some really awkward introductions at open mics because, there's like, oh, and the editor of Apiary. And you're like, oh no, I shouldn't have chosen such an obscure word. That's a terrible idea. But people also, I also really enjoy seeing the gleam in people's eyes when I say, well, an apiary is a place where bees live. And it's where they have many different hives of bees, each making their own flavor of honey. And the job of a beekeeper, of an apiary, is to go and collect all of those and to, make it available for people in its condensed form, because on their own, bees make very, very small amounts, but together they make something really delicious. So the idea is we go and we collect from these many different communities and we put it into one place. The presentation that I have is, as you will see, it's from this really great workshop I took. Part of what is interesting to me, being the editor of Apiary, is that it's been this amazing learning process for me. I've never started a business or a nonprofit. This came purely because I really enjoyed doing it. And I find myself up at 3 a.m. sending emails and making flyers. And I realized that I've spent more time that day doing this than my day job, than cooking dinner, than hanging out with my friends. And it's completely painless. It's really fun. So everything that I've gotten to do so far has been very enjoyable. And I think that it's a gift to me that I've been able to spend so much time on it. And so part of what I hope you ask me about is the process of doing it, because it's very much an open process. I'm not pretending to be a super expert on literary magazines. But one of the resources I came across is called the Empowerment Group. It's a small business incubator in North Philly. And they offer artist entrepreneurship workshops. And one of the things they asked us to do was to make a presentation about our organization. And so I thought I'd bring that and share it because it's part of my process. I'm not going to do the whole thing. It's a structure and a way to explain what Apiary is and what we're trying to do. And kind of has some resources. So please come up and ask me about the Empowerment Group if you have any questions. I love promoting them. They have money for new businesses. They're really into helping people start their own kind of backyard projects like this one and make Philly a center of industry one day. I need to figure out how to make this big screen. Okay, so I'm just going to flip through these really quickly. This is our website in case you are wondering and want to go visit us. This is the basic info about us. We're quarterly right now. We do print twice a year and online twice a year. That format is constantly changing. So if we say we're going to publish you, we're going to publish you. If we say we're going to publish you in fall or winter, that will happen. It'll happen in fall. It'll happen in winter. We're not promising exactly when, at least until we kind of get things more down. But this is our second year, and we're already kind of hitting a rhythm. So we have a magazine, a website, and we have live showcases, which is basically when we invite a bunch of our writers together to perform. This is where I'm selling the audience my presentation on Apiary. my big pitch is, if you know anyone who really should advertise in Apiary this next edition, you should tell them about us, because we are finally realizing one of our big dreams, which is to be a free publication. That was our original idea, and we're finally going to have enough people on staff and enough experience and enough of a strong identity in the city to be able to go to advertisers and say, hey, people read this, they like it. We had 350 people at our last launch party. They had a story on WHYY. You should definitely advertise with us. And that has been one of the things I'm proudest of personally, because that means that I'll be able to get advertising and to distribute this everywhere. Including here. So the idea, so the B, it's, so writing starts with a single person, an individual who has something to say. And one of my favorite things I tell people when we're talking about this is the idea that you can't tell lies and write good poetry, which is a quote by June Jordan, who's a phenomenal poet and thinker about poetry and how it connects people. And I love that, because if you're writing something, there's something in it that's true, and whoever's reading it is reading something true about the way you experience the world. Which is why it's so powerful when you go and find other people to share it with. This lovely woman, April, she helps promote The Harvest, which is one of the city's biggest open mics, which is excellent. It's on Thursdays. It's a huge amount of fun if you ever want to go. It's over at World Cafe. She says, this is my church. This is my place where I can go and be spiritual and connect with other people and address spiritual issues. And it's in a secular setting, but it's the same kind of presence and thought and willingness to open up to big ideas about what's happening in your life. Ooh, okay, so, all right, well, the whole idea is that Philly is full of these little, you can call it church if you want, community, whatever, all these little spaces. They happen every week. They happen many times a week. And each of them is a different little place where people get together and listen to one another, which I think is kind of miraculous and beautiful. And so these are just a few of the pictures that from communities we've gone and visited and taken pictures of and talked to and interviewed. This is on the far left, it's the Asian Arts Initiative. Sonia Sanchez. This is Mighty Writers, the young lady in the white shirt. The red hat is Sam Allingham. He's a great young fiction writer here in Philly. He runs the Moles Not Molar reading series. And he was in our first issue. This below Sam is Aziza Kinte. She runs a spoken word open mic, and she'll show up to your reading, and she just, will ululate for the things that she thinks are beautiful in the back, and she just lifts everyone up. It's really great. This is one of my favorite young groups of writers. This is Alana Gooden. She's from the Philly Youth Poetry Movement, and it's a space where young people can come and work through what's happening at home or at school. She has done several poems about being queer and being young and being African American, and it offers a space for her to do that, which is essential, I think, in the city. Mayor Nutter really loves PYPM. You should go look them up. You should go donate. They really give a lot of kids something very, very important, which is a family and a way to deal with the issues they're confronting. This is a wooden shoe bookstore. This is Ian Pollock. You get the idea. Oh, this is Larry Robin. I don't know how many of you guys have been to Robin's bookstore. You got to go. Everyone recognizes him. And so we kind of observed that these many little literary communities, often there can be a little cliquish, which I think is great. You need a safe place in which to speak to people about your ideas. But part of that also, we think that splintering also contributes to the reason that Philly is not known as this amazing place for writing, which it is. I mean, I've had so many writers come up to tell, just overheard in conversation, this is absolutely the best city to be a writer in the whole United States, which I think is pretty cool. So this is kind of the stuff we're trying to address. It doesn't really have a good central source for literary listings, so we're trying to offer one. If you're new to the city, how do you get hooked up with all the stuff going on? How do you kind of get a map of where things are? There's not a space for young writers, and there's not really a diversity of the writing being shown. So we're trying to connect all of this. And finally, this is the website. I don't know how many of you have been there, but we're constantly accepting writers. So if you want to write up an article, write up a profile of someone, interview a writer you admire, write up an event you've gone to see, send it to us, because what we want to be is a space where these voices are constantly kind of flowing across the screen, and you can open it up and you don't know who you're going to hear from that day. So that's what this section, Philly Buzz, is. This is Malika Fruian. She runs the bookstore Big Blue Marble up in Mount Airy, and so she wanted to interview one of her favorite writers, and so she sent us that profile. And up here we'll have a featured author, featured event. This last one was the Milano Poetry Series, which is happening, I think, tomorrow or Wednesday at this pizza place. The Warrior Writers. It's a featured video. He's an Iraq vet who has joined a writing group for vets called Warrior Writers, and so on and so forth. So you should go and click around to see what you think. And finally, just to illustrate my point, this is our Philly literary calendar. It's constantly being updated. Just today, I got a bunch of new emails in my inbox that I need to add. But if you have any event that you want to advertise, just send it to the events at Apiary Magazine address. And you can actually request your own calendar login. I'm hoping that people I give the login to don't just erase everything. So hopefully there are no sinister writers out there. But yeah, if you frequently host events, you should totally ask for a login, and then you can list them. I don't have to. So we're trying to keep it open to people so they can kind of contribute as they see fit. And finally, this is the basic information for you. These are the ways to come and work with us and get yourself heard on the site and in the magazine. You can read it online. You can buy this little guy, which is one of the favorite things I've ever made, although I made it with lots of other people. And it's $10 online, and it's $8 today. I have some copies. And then our next free issue is going to be distributed out and about. You can submit. Absolutely submit. Tell your friends to submit. Tell your great aunt to submit her nature writing or whatever she's doing. We are really looking at a lot of the submissions we get that we end up loving come from word of mouth. So tell people that we're here. Advertise. And you can actually watch the Apiary mixtape, which is I think we just found a video editor for the magazine, or we're getting some applications in. So right now, what the Apiary mixtape is, we take video footage from different authors around the city and we compile it into a half-hour show, and it's on public access TV. And finally, we have editorial positions open on the website, and we always are looking for folks who want to write or contribute, or have some great ideas that we haven't heard yet. So you can do that whenever you like. And that's it. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Lillian. What we'd like to do is open this up to questions from the audience, and our lovely assistant, Pascal, will be working this machine. She had a little lesson in how to do that. Okay, great. So, questions?
I'm just curious about the funding for something like this, what you had to raise ahead of time and how that's working.
That's a good question. Okay, so we did it as we went along, as everything else with this entire magazine. We funded the first one ourselves, and I can tell you horror stories about that, but we funded the first one ourselves, and we mostly paid ourselves back and got enough to contribute to the second one. And for the second one, we did a Kickstarter, which was a great way of doing it, and we raised enough money to print this book and to make a new website, because our old one was really hilarious and looked like it had been made in 1993 by my mom. And so then this book we're selling at enough of a profit to pay for another one of the books, and so that Kickstarter money was really key, and I think a lot of people are using that nowadays.
Can you give us more information?
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I get so many Kickstarter requests from my friends these days that I just assume everyone knows. Everyone's hitting me up for their new CD or whatever. So it's a website where you can propose a project. So we proposed, we want to make Apiary 2. And it's going to cost roughly $2,000. It's going to, and then for every level of donation that you get within a specific period of time, we chose 90 days, which is the longest period you can choose. People pledge different levels, and at each different level you get a certain prize. So we pre-sold many copies of Apiary by by means of the pledge. Some people chose to have their issue donated to a school. We're donating them to the Philadelphia Writing Project to be used by teachers who teach writing in the classroom. And if you make your goal within the allotted time, then you get the money. If you don't make your goal, you don't get anything.
Yeah, that's the key about Kickstarter. If you're unsuccessful, then none of the donations go through. So if you give money to a Kickstarter campaign, you may in October pledge, $40. But if after the 90 days they haven't met their goal, your $40 will not be collected. And if they have, then $40 will be taken from your bank account or credit card or whatever. So it's risky.
Yeah, so if it hadn't worked out, we would have been very sad and had to staple together a copy of Apiary and send it to all the writers and call it a day.
When you say you self-funded your first issue, does that mean everyone just kicked in money from their savings?
We just all chipped in and, added to the credit card debt a little bit. But it worked out. We paid ourselves back a fair amount and enough that we didn't feel really bad about it. So. I think the gentleman back there had a question.
Is there a fee for submissions, and do you take nonfiction?
We absolutely take nonfiction. We take all genres, and there's no fee for submissions.
And how does someone submit?
All you got to do is you go to the website, and you click submit, and you will be taken to a submishmash form, which is a submissions program where you just enter your submission, you enter all your information, and then it sends it directly to us. And what it does is it filters it through, so then all the editors can read it and put their comments next to your piece, and we can all kind of look at the same thing, because many of us don't actually live here anymore. So,
what happens if someone doesn't have access to the internet and they want to submit to you?
That's a good question. We have a Flatland address, which is my house, so please don't come there. Or if you do, bring a baked good, please. And you can send those to me if you like, or you can you can send us an email. You can have someone else send us an email and say, I have this, and we actually use Moonstone Art Center as kind of a drop-off point for some things, so you can drop something off there.
110 South 13th Street, upstairs.
Yeah, upstairs.
I happen to have that memorized. Not for them, just for me.
All the event listings.
Do you pay the writers and those who submit artwork? And for those who submit artwork, what are you looking for most specifically?
So you're saying, first of all, do we pay writers and artists? And second of all, what are we looking for in terms of artwork? Two good questions. We do not pay artists and writers. I'm sorry. We're hoping that what this provides is a way for writers to be seen, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the writers. So we're trying not to be a hassle for people, and hopefully that makes up for the lack of filthy lucre that they can earn from it. And I mean, we've talked about doing about contests, but the prize money would come from you pay $5 or $10 to enter the contest, and I still don't know how I feel about that. I know that it's a really good way to get a prize pot together, but that's something that is in the future. In terms of artwork, we did something with this issue that I think we're going to keep on doing because I really liked it, and so did a lot of our readers. We chose one feature artist for the whole issue. For the print edition. It might be different for the online editions, but we have one artist, and so his work kind of creates a narrative throughout the entire magazine. And it also gives us a pool of work to choose from. And because the page numbers are sometimes unpredictable, it doesn't mean we can say, oh yeah, we'll take your piece of artwork and then maybe not have room for it. So I think we're going to continue doing that. We're actually looking for an art editor right now. So all you artsy people, think about it. We're looking for someone who will go out to different art communities and find that person for every issue who would be a really great fit for the material and who would be willing to have their stuff splashed all over the book.
How is the artwork submitted? Is that the same way?
Submitted by email as of now. So you can just attach it. It can be a low resolution file. I know it's hard to get those big files through the mail sometimes. So we ask for just a decent resolution image. You send it to us as an attachment with your information, and then we'll ask you for a higher resolution image if we really like it. Yeah. all these artists here. I love it.
How many submissions are you getting now, and how does that relate to how much you can publish?
We got, for the last edition, so for our first edition, we got like 60 things. And everything else, but we published about 100 things. So it was a lot of groundwork of going to our favorite people and being like, please, 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 we're just trying to start this thing. And me probably harassing a lot of people. I hope my reputation has recovered since then. And it actually went up to about 500 submissions for our next edition, which I was very pleased with. And we're establishing channels right now. My goal is, especially for youth submissions, and for some of the workshops, some of the first time people who are publishing for the first time, we're hoping to kind of set up those channels like, okay, your workshop, just send me your stuff. So Asian Arts Initiative has a youth workshop, and they write really beautiful things with Michelle Myers, who is one of the poets from Yellow Rage, and they just will send us things. So we kind of get these big chunks of submissions from those sources. As of now, we just opened submissions on September 1st. I think we have about 60, 70. And we try to just automatically eliminate a lot of the ones we get from, we're trying to keep it very local. So we're on Duotrope, which means that people just see us and kind of click and kind of blanket submission us. So we eliminate those.
We may need to explain what Duotrope is.
It's a site listed in Poets and Writers, I believe. And it's a site where you can just put in your story, and you can click all the places you want to submit, and you can kind of press send.
If you're a freelance literary fiction writer, Duotrope is an amazing resource. You go to duotrope.com and you make an account, and it lists all the. Not every literary magazine is on Duotrope, but pretty much there are thousands of magazines there. And in your account, you can when you pull up a magazine, it will also tell you magazines that are similar, and it'll tell you information such as their record of how many submissions they accept, and things like that. It gives you a lot of really very specific information. It helps you manage your submissions. So being on Duotrope would, of course, increase outside of Philadelphia submissions for a local magazine, because I think some of the users don't read the descriptions very carefully. But if you're a literary writer, I would definitely recommend that as a way of managing your submissions. Nobody sees what you've submitted, but you can log in and really keep track of it. So, it's up to you to keep track if something is accepted or rejected, or if you get a kind of a nice, encouraging letter from an editor, you can note all that on your Duotrope account.
I have so many answers. I just need some questions.
David has another.
What's your long-term vision for the magazine?
That's a great question.
I'm just going to repeat that because the point of the microphones is actually for recording, not so much. And he asked, what is the long-term vision for the magazine?
Okay. That's a very exciting question because this summer, 2 of our founding editors went to go do MFA programs, which I'm so excited about. I think that actually reading all this literature and going out and seeing all of these amazing poets right here in Philly and poets and fiction writers kind of got them kickstarted and actually made them go pursue their writing dreams. So they are off in MFA land very happily, which means that it's me and Tamara running the magazine. And so there was a moment this summer where I thought, you know what, maybe this next issue is going to be our last issue. But I just couldn't leave it alone, and neither could Tamara, and we kept getting notes from people and kept getting submissions. And so we decided that, all right, this is something that people actually are looking forward to seeing the next one of. So we are currently planning to keep this going as a free publication for as long as it will go. We're getting new editors on staff, and my long-term hope would be that we can find an affiliate organization with more power and money, possibly like a university, that is interested in hosting the publication and kind of refreshing it with new, young, brilliant staff people. Like that happened for Painted Bride Quarterly. It was over at, I think, Rutgers, and it moved to Drexel, and I think that it definitely benefits from having all those awesome young writers there with a lot of energy and more free time. And that is what I would love to happen for Apiary. I would love to find it a home, or someone who is going to be here for the next 30 years and really loves it. And the funny thing is, I didn't think I was going to be in Philly for much longer than a few years. But as I've worked on this, it's become something that I love doing so much that it's kind of sort of put some taproots into the ground just doing it. And so it's something that I can see myself working on for quite a while.
As far as the size of the magazine, because I know the first issue was a different size from the second issue, what is the next step for the third issue, and why did you make the decisions that you did?
Okay, that's all these great questions. Okay, it's so fun to be asked this stuff. Everyone else is so bored about about hearing about it. All my friends. This guy, we chose an 8x8 because it was square, and we didn't really know what we were doing. So. We wanted a square magazine because we wanted to set ourselves apart, and we wanted it to be something kind of fun and playful, almost like a building block, something that feels very approachable. And so we chose this size. It was a little too big, and it kind of left some of the work swimming a little bit on the page. And so we moved to a smaller size, and that fit a lot more neatly, and people just really love touching it, and they want, people pick it up, and it's almost like they're trying to it's just really fun. So we have this picture on the website of my friend Angel Hogan trying to eat an apiary. And for our next one, I don't know what we're going to do about the square format. I think for the next edition, we're going to go 8.5 by 11 because we're going to go to a kind of heavy newsprint. And so that's going to be an experiment. So we're going to see what we can maintain stylistically of this feeling with doing a more traditional newsprint kind of magazine style. So it's up in the air, but I think we're going to go 8.5 by 11 and then see if we can work out a deal with the printers to go back to a square format after that.
What was the hardest step in just starting up the magazine?
This is
or is
going
that too vague of a question?
No. This is going to reveal a lot about how we started this magazine, which is that we just kind of started it. So there wasn't really a hard part. It was jumping into it. We kind of jumped into it feet first. I think the hardest part came not after starting it. It came after the first issue and realizing, we just made ourselves a thing. Now we have to keep being a thing. We can't just stop answering our emails for 2 months if we want to. So it's the stamina. It's the endurance. And I think that it's also become realizing that we're responsible to the writers and to the people we talk to. It starts out as a fun project, but then I've had people say to me, like, why didn't you choose my friend's piece of writing? And I'm just like, oh my God, it's like the middle school literary magazine, But if you're offering yourself up as a space for community, you're kind of a facilitator of that. And I think that that's a responsibility that it's kind of like, I'm not that person, I'm new to Philly. I'm not lifelong Philly, but I think that just trying to be there and constantly consider what it means to say that you're creating a community is, one of the most difficult questions we have.
I have a question apropos to what you're saying, especially with your plans for the future. I mean, it seems to me that one of the amazing strengths that makes Apiary what it is that you started sort of spontaneously and you created this magazine out of just love for the idea of creating a community magazine in a community space that also has some kind of like gatekeeper standards, because you do have, good literary editors who select the materials. You have a tremendous amount of control. Like, you're able to say, okay, this week this issue is going to be smaller, or next issue is going to be newsprint and it's going to be free and we're getting advertisers. And it's a lot of work to do that, but you have control. If you become part of a larger organization like a university, you'll lose that control. How does that feel? Having poured your lifeblood into this. Yeah. I put her on the spot.
No, you didn't put me on the spot. You asked me to think a step ahead where I've even gone. Yeah. Because right now what would give me the greatest joy is to know that it will keep being there. Mm-hmm. And if it keeps its philosophy and that someone out there is working very hard to make connections and go around to different places and see the variety of writing that's happening in Philadelphia and to bring in good pieces of it. If someone is making that effort, I don't really care what it looks like, as long as it's pretty enough that people want to read it. Frankly, Nick, our design guy, might not agree, but this is kind of the fun part, and what it looks like and how people approach it, and we've managed to have, without too much discussion or disagreement, a pretty coherent vision for it. But I think what I want more than anything is just for the basic idea of it to continue, because that's what we fell in love with in the first place.
I'm interested in the print versus online. Do you have people who are submitting who really just want to be in the print one and feel like it's second tier to be online? And how are you making a decision what goes where?
That's a really good question, and it's one of the things we've dealt with. When we first started out, we thought, I'll be honest, we did think, the online will be for the stuff that was almost good enough for the print issue, but not really quite. And then we thought, wait a minute, more people are going to see the online magazine. We can only print monetarily. We can only print about 250 of these little guys. That's why we call it a limited edition on the website. Fancied for we don't have enough money to print anymore. But we realized we actually need to have equally high standards for the online edition, if not possibly higher, because we know that's something that we can just email to someone and they can read the whole thing. And that will be how a lot of people first encounter the magazine, which is why when you go to the print, the Apiary, the Read Apiary page, the sample of the print edition is really long, and a lot of people think it's the whole magazine, because I just wanted people to see all the good stuff in it. I'm a terrible businesswoman. I was like, here, look at this giant sample so you can buy the print thing. But I'm hoping enough people will actually want the print object that they will buy it. So now we actually think of them as equals. And I don't know how that's going to change if we can go free with the print edition, and if we can find enough advertising funds to do that quarterly, because that would be a joy. I would love to do that, because I want it to be something that people just encounter and are surprised by, and there's nothing better than that moment when you flip to a page and you're like, oh, who is this person? Who's this writer? I like this writer. I'm going to go find out more about them, so we want that to happen kind of on a daily basis for people.
I think a lot of your feelings about print versus the physical object of magazines comes from in the early days of the internet, when literary magazines, which were formerly always only printed because that's all we had, when they began to publish online editions, it usually was true that when a writer was offered a place on the online issue, it was always kind of like, well, you can't really be in our magazine, but we'll throw you this bone. And I can remember in the late 90s, writers saying, well, I'll never submit to an online magazine. And now it's really changed, because if something's not searchable online, it kind of disappears unless you happen to have the physical object. So there's this tension between, what exists in physical world and what exists online, which can be accessed by anyone. And you probably look at your analytics and see people from all over the world are looking at this magazine, and so the readership online will suddenly be much, much wider than the small print run you do. On the other hand, one thing that seems to be a real plus and interesting thing about Apiary is that you're very much in the real world. You do a lot of events, and you partner with all these other literary institutions in the city. And at the events, there are copies of the magazine, which can't. And so at the event, someone can pick up a real Apiary and look through it and see the artwork and see the poems and whatnot. But unless they happen to have an iPad with them, they're not going, and they're probably not doing that in an event. They're not going to go flip through your online issue at that moment. So it's kind of you really need a foot in both worlds, and I just think that's really interesting. And I'm curious, if you thought about that going forward, or what that means. And what about the stuff that's only in the print issue? Is that's not really lost because you have your giant sample? Mm-hmm. So yeah,
that's a really good question. Actually, one of the people we're bringing on as a reader for us, I encountered her. I met her in the real world first as a fellow mentor at Mighty Writers. But then I on her Facebook, she had this link to her blog, a Tumblr, and I was like, a Tumblr? What is this thing? I've learned a bunch of this stuff just by doing it, and so I started reading her page, and her writing was awesome, and it was all online. And I just accessed this person whose writing I loved, and there it was all this writing. And she had this huge kind of blog roll of all these other really great edgy literary magazines. And I find that a lot of the literary magazines that I enjoy are much kind of sharper and weirder and goopier and grosser and more fun and than some of the print stuff that I come across. Because it's a lot of really young people writing them. You know, like teenagers are running really good literary magazines. And I found that those magazines are not in the form that we are using currently. And this is a jump that I would like to make if we ever do an online, just a straight, like we have a print and we have an online. They're the same edition. What we currently have, we have this online reader where you can click on it and it comes full screen and you kind of flip your pages. But the ones that I find very enjoyable to read, the magazine is actually its own website. And each link is a new piece. And it's a much more organic reading experience than kind of pretending that you have a book in front of you and flipping the pages. So the online reading experience itself is changing to become more pleasurable, I believe, as well.
Could you let us know who that person was? Because I want to go look up that Tumblr account.
Her name, I think she's under, you can find her at Mother, W-A-P, motherwap.tumblr.com. And her name,
Did you say Mother Walk? Or
WAP.
WAP.
W-A-P.
WAP.
And her writing name is Raz, R-A-S. And her last name is Mashrami, M-A-S-H-R-A-M-A-N-I. Spelling bee flashback, yes. Okay.
Have you done any radio author forums?
Have I done any radio author
Author
forums?
forums.
No, but
Okay,
that
there you
sounds
go.
really cool. All right. Actually, thank you. This is kind of one of those questions about, being a facilitator of community or conversation that we've talked about. The most directly we've ever done that is when we had our reading at Giovanni's Room, which was a gathering of queer authors and queer allies who were all reading about love in different forms. We had a discussion at the end, and each of these authors had an incredibly different perspective. And I mean, the topics were just like all over the place. It was like gay marriage, it was the Iraq War, it was everything. It was Philly in the 80s and what that was like when the skinheads would come down 13th Street and just beat up drag queens. Like it was everything. And that conversation was really fabulous. And so, if we keep doing the TV show, Philly Cam, the public access channel, has just opened up a live taping studio. And eventually, I would love to get to the point where you could invite authors in and have kind of a live TV show and conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to know how you established your circulation. Are you in libraries and bookstores? And then also, do you find that you sell a lot of copies of your journal through your website?
That's a great question. And probably getting the jump on some of the kids in Karen's workshop, some of the ladies and gentlemen in Karen's workshop. We are under review for being in libraries. They actually pay double price, or they pay a greater price because more people can actually read it. So that's why you have the regular price and library price on the back sometimes. So we're under review, and they have to decide, and it's a bureaucracy, so who knows. But that would be my dream. It would be to have apiary and libraries. That'd be so great. And we sell a fair amount on the website. I'm psyched whenever I find someone bought an online copy, because often it's people I don't know, which is really great. I try to sell at a discounted rate to teachers who I know are going to use them in the classroom. Eventually, my ideal would be to have a special school edition that would be a PDF you could just download. We sell in small local bookstores, and we sell at a slow and steady rate, which I'm very pleased with. And the vast majority of issues we sell comes from holding events and selling the issues there, because then people can kind of get what we're talking about, and they see these writers and they're like, oh, that person's great. I need this poem now. So that's the best way to sell them, which is really exhausting, which is why I'm very excited that we're going to do a free issue. So I don't have to, plan for 2 months to sell 10 copies of my magazine.
Is there a certain style that your team of editors looks for the magazine? And kind of a part of that, would you say like all the editors have similar tastes, or are there editors with different tastes who choose different pieces that other editors may not actually like, I guess, choose?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something we'll probably get into more in depth in the workshop. But we all have very different tastes and have very different voices on the page. I'm more lyrical. Tamara has a very... Tamara is Tamara. Michelle has this amazing, smart, slightly cracked, funny voice that is at the same time very humane as a writer. Nick is, I mean, it's difficult to describe everyone's style, but I think that we all come from very different interests in very different places. And the most exciting and fun part of the magazine is when you get together and you're arguing about a piece, you know, and that's why it's important to us to not only have many different pieces from many different kinds of people, but because then you get really good discussions going, you also have all of us with our different identities trying to talk about the same piece. And so I remember one piece we had, it involved a gay character, and the discussion about it from our many different perspectives who have different connections or ideas about queerness. I mean, we fought about it. You know, like 3 of us had preliminarily accepted it and been like, yeah, I think so. And then one person was like, no, hell no. And he won us over, you know, like, no, this is really ridiculous. And that additional perspective kind of enabled us to see like, oh, I can understand why this is not as deep or rich as we would like this to be. So I think that the conversations we have about style, everything is consensus. We all have to agree, but we have very strong and very differing opinions. I'm like the Paula Abdul of Apiary. Mm-hmm. I'll say, oh, but this one image is so beautiful. And they're like, yeah, but the whole poem doesn't make any sense. So, you know, I'm going to have to start my own magazine of just like the really beautiful little bits of rejected pieces. And if you open up a magazine, I think you'll find that the pieces differ vastly stylistically. We take things that are much more formal and traditional, and we take things that, and we include spoken word, which is its own kind of style, and different poets have different styles. And in the fiction, again, we'll get into this more, but the biggest thing we're looking for is that you just kind of knock our socks off, you know, like it's giving us something new. It's giving us something surprising. That might be the voice and might be the style, or it might be just what happens in the story and it's a really straightforward, maybe you're even copying Raymond Carver, you know, maybe it's just, you know, it's really straight and basic and minimalist, but if something awesome is happening, then that might get us to give it the go ahead.
If we don't have any more questions, I think that we could go back. Is there food left there, or has that been all taken away? We could just sort of be a little more informal, and Lillian could grab something to eat, and you guys could just come up and chat with her. And I think she has some magazines with her.
I do.
Yeah.
And submissions flyers for everyone.
And flyers, because I know you're all going to submit. Let's bring the number up to 1,000 submissions for the next issue. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. But hang around because we're going to be here till 1:30.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here.